A very good morning to you and welcome. You're watching Media and Society live on SABC News, Africa's news leader. Now, the concept of this program is to monitor and evaluate media coverage of some of the major news stories of the day and throughout the week. We'll strive to simplify your headline stories, also taking in your views on the news that made us talk. As 16 days of activism is underway, we take a look at how public perceptions are shaped by how the media presents topics and stories on gender-based violence. On the back of the South African Radio Awards, we'll be speaking to some big winners on their thoughts and medium and where it's going. Well, yes, the Radio Awards winners have been named, and we'll be talking to a number of them a little bit later on. And speaking to the head of PBS Radio to tell us why public broadcasting radio is doing so well. All right, you're watching Media and Society. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. I'm Peter Ndoro, standing in for Naledi Mulewa this week. And as I said, this is a show that's pretty much an intersection between media and society. And this show wouldn't be complete without your input. So please give us a call during the show on Johannesburg 011 714 0661 or 0662. Let's say that number again, 011 714 0661 or 0662. Okay, or you can tweet us actually using the hashtag SABC Media Society. We look forward to hearing from you. This is very much a part of you as well. Okay. All right, let's start the show, and let's start with our discussion on media and gender-based violence. But before that, there was a concerning story that we had to show during the course of this past week on our news channel. And sadly, it's the kind of story that we'll be telling more and more, particularly during these 16 days of violence against women and children. And it is heartbreaking. So just a warning that sensitive viewers might find this difficult to watch.
The mother of the young girl alleges that her daughter was raped for 4 consecutive days last week. And this, she says, has affected her child emotionally and physically.
I'm heartbroken. I don't know what to do. When the child is sleeping next to me, you keep crying, Mama, this painful year, it's painful year. That is also painful to me.
It is alleged that the accused, who is also a teacher, would give the 9-year-old money in exchange for her silence.
He must always be in jail because of children. For now, they are not safe. If I can see him, I'm going to take the law in my hands.
The 60-year-old is expected back in court next week. Although the accused remains in custody, this mother of 3 says they have a long way to go before they could heal from the ordeal. Neria Hlakotza, SABC News, Kimberley.
Right, yeah, difficult to watch, difficult to listen to, but sadly, a story that plays out every single day. And an article written by Sasanda Nkwala suggests that media coverage on gender-based violence is lacking in sensitivity. She suggests that sensationalism sometimes takes precedence over sensitivity and that some editorial choices perpetuate victim shaming. As 16 days of activism is underway, we would be amiss not to delve a little deeper into this indictment on the media and more, widen the discussion to include the arts and how portrayals of gender-based violence shape the minds of society. Well, joining us today, we have Ntsiki Noya, who's an award-winning journalist and producer with the television program Cutting Edge. And we also have someone who's very familiar on our screens and also radio airwaves, Vatiswa Ndaga, actress, author, and we're going to be chatting to them. I'm hoping we might be able to speak to Sisanda Nkwala as well. In fact, let's meet her as well. Sisanda, a very good morning to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning to the other guests.
Ah, fantastic. All right. You at home, don't forget, you can call us on 011 714 0661 or 0662 or tweet us using the hashtag SABC Media and Society. Sisanda, let's start with you because your article is what kind of provoked this conversation, and it is one that's been talked about for a number of years. I remember 2 years ago there was a big gathering at Wits University about the media and how we tell stories. In your research, in the work that you've been doing, what have you found?
Thank you very much, Peter, for the opportunity. So this study forms part of a broader study that looked at news reports on crime and the criminal justice system in South Africa as part of my PhD, which I finished in July. And I zoned in on the issue of gender-based violence because really there was such a striking difference in a lot of areas. So, for example, when there are references that are made to women compared to men, when men who are the perpetrators of the violence are spoken about, passive language is employed, whereas when women are being written about, it is more the active language that makes them subjects in the story and really takes away a little bit of their agency. I also noticed some trends where there was an inclination to try and emphasize this good girl versus bad girl narrative. So in the one story I looked at, there was a father whose daughter had allegedly been raped. And then he says he doesn't understand how this happened. This was a good girl. She didn't go to taverns, etc. So in the need to try and contextualize these stories, we often see there are explanations that this kind of crime does not befall certain women and tends to happen to other kinds of women. So that good girl versus bad girl narrative. And then the one that you mentioned in terms of the sensationalism, where you really zone in on the most horrific stories. So in the 1 year that I collected my data, there was a mother and her 5 children, I think one who was a 6-month-old, who were brutally attacked by her partner. And that really became the story for that year's 16 days. And the point there was that in focusing on the really sensational stories, we miss out on an opportunity to delve into the more systemic issues that we know give rise to gender-based violence, like the one that you just said now, where it is that power dynamic between a student or a learner and a teacher, and those tend to be more common. And really, my article isn't so much an indictment, but rather an encouragement towards critiquing what it is that we do to make sure we make use of the opportunity of these 16 days to give really in-depth critical coverage that will hold newsmakers to account.
All right, you've said quite a few things and I want to unpack them in just a few moments' time. But let's join Ntsiki Noya, who's with Cutting Edge, one of our current affairs shows, award-winning. And I just wonder, is she not there? All right. Okay, we're struggling to get hold of Ntsiki, but we'll get her just now. Another layer to this, and we're going to run parallel conversations, is how film, television, and culture portrays gender-based violence. But I want to start with your personal story, because you've just written a book, yes. Another one, Unfiltered, and you talk about gender-based violence that you've experienced yourself. In this industry. Yes. Tell us a little bit about your experience, and when you tell me that story, tell me if what the media has been reporting tells your kind of story, or are there things that we're missing?
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for this opportunity. when I go back to my experiences, first of all, we have to look at the people that run media. It's predominantly men. So therefore, I think the tone and the agenda is from their perspective.
Right.
And so what goes out and what the community is given, they respond to the tone of the people that are in power, which is mostly men and mostly the ones that are perpetrators. So in my experiences, you must remember it was a place filled with men. I had to report my incidents to men. I had to go and report a rape case to men. So media is not does not operate in a vacuum as well. So they fall victim, so to speak, to this tone and agenda of these people that are in power.
I'm going to ask you another question now, because you're an actress as well.
Yep.
And sometimes I found over the years the intention in some of the scenes is not, we haven't really thought about why are we doing this scene this way. It's almost as if we have to have a certain amount of nudity. One way to get it in is a rape scene or XYZ. Do you think that the portrayal of gender-based violence is done with a purposeful intention, or is it just a question of sometimes filling in a quota of certain things?
I really think it's the latter.
Yeah.
I don't know how much impact some of these things, some of the shows we do, I really don't know what impact they have. Because, when people watch these shows, you are hoping as somebody who's created it that people will take something from it. But what is happening and what I find is that GBV has become a norm. And so what impact do, as artists and the space that we're in, are we empowering people? Because as I think the lady was saying, Sister Sanda, the women are subjectified, and so I don't know if the impact is there, because why do we still say you shouldn't have gone to that place? We told you. It's almost as if we're living in a forest with wild animals, that the softer animals, the little furry ones, should not go out there because the lions, the lions are going to be out there. So stay at home at night, and why can't we be free?
Yeah. All right, let's get to Nsiki Noya, who's a cutting-edge reporter and one that's been covering stories like this over time. Nsiki, thanks so much indeed for joining us. I have to admit, when I read Sisanda's article and did a bit of research, I do think that there are things as reporters and journalists that we can do better. What are your thoughts? How difficult is it to tell the story of gender-based violence? And are you always conscious of the narrative that it might be sending out beyond just telling the story as it is?
Thank you very much, Peter, for the opportunity. Indeed, it is not easy to tell a story of a victim, in this case, of a gender-based violence victim. You need to try as a journalist to be as factual as possible and guard against revealing the identity of the victim. If it is possible, you silhouette even the victim from the location. I've seen the clip just now that played just now, as Asanda has put it out, that we are sensationalizing at some point when reporting on these issues. You need to, not to identify the identity of the victim at all costs. I saw that girl. Anyone from the next door would be able to identify that that is so and so. You don't do that. You even change the voice. I saw the clip. The voice was not tweaked at all. You can see, you can hear clearly hear who is talking there. We do that, Peter, for to avoid the secondary trauma. Imagine a 9-year-old who is raped today, and 30 years later, she sees herself in digital platforms. That is really traumatizing. But having said that, Peter, that shouldn't deter us as journalists to tell those stories, because to end the gender-based violence, need all of us to tell those stories as journalists until something is done.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you just now about how conscious we are as reporters. But Sisanda, there are other elements I think that maybe sometimes we're wanting, and it could be things like context, isn't it? I mean, that story that we showed, the one thing that struck me about it as well was that we tell one story, but we don't give numbers of how many children are being raped in the year, because then we get a sense of just how big the problem is. By telling one story, we can perhaps understate the size of the issue. And yes, we should have disguised her voice, but another aspect I believe is that we don't always give enough voices to the victims.
I agree, Peter, and I think often because of the medium of television, right? Television really being about the individual story that is supposed to be a microcosm of the macro picture, that can be the reason behind it. But as you're talking about telling one story, I would also like to flip it on its head and read and share this quote by Jackson Katz, which I think sums up the fundamental argument that I'm trying to make in my paper. And Jackson says that we talk about how many women were raped last year, not how many men raped women.
Right.
We talk about how many school children were, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you. Carry on.
Okay. Yes, I was saying we talk about how many school children were harassed, but not how many boys harassed children. So you can see the use of passive language has a political effect. It shifts the focus off of men and boys onto girls and women. And Jackson talks about how even the term violence against women is problematic because it's a passive construction. There's no agent in the sentence. It's bad things, as Vatiso was saying, that happen to women. But when you look at the term violence against women, nobody is doing it to them. So I think one of the things we need to really consider is in telling these individual stories and trying to give a voice to women who have been silenced. How do we hold the perpetrators accountable? Because media is such a powerful instrument. And if you think of the 16 days and what could be done if we took on an activism approach where we're not just reporting and we're not just stating stats, which are needed, but we take the role of activists and agents that then hold the systems and structures to account, I think the tone would really mobilize society in a much better way than this tone, which tends to just make us feel like the issue is so big that, you know, we dare not even try and fight against it. So yes, the individual stories matter. Whose stories we are telling, how we are telling them, and why we are telling them, I think is something we need to critique.
All right, we'll continue to unpack this conversation after the break. Stay with us. You're watching Media and Society, and today we're taking a look at media and how gender-based violence is portrayed and also reported on. Stay with us for more. Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society, and we are taking a look at gender-based violence and how it's being portrayed in culture, our films, our drama series, and also how it's being reported by our journalists. And we have a number of guests, and one of them is actress and author Vatiswa Ndoro. Vatiswa, we're starting to see more and more when an actress is on set and is about to do a nude scene, for example, that there are consultants that are brought in to help the director, not to do things overdo it, and to give it a reason and a purpose. Could there be a case to do that around violence against women, so that it's not gratuitous unnecessarily, but that it's done tastefully and with a purpose?
I'm so glad they started doing that, because some of the things that have to be shot, probably like a rape scene, those are very sensitive things. And so by having these people, I'm sure somebody started picking up that some of the directors are living their fantasies through these scenes. And someone can be pushed to a point of emotional breakdown, psychological breakdown, because the director doesn't care. There was no end point that, okay, this is enough and tasteful enough for the viewers. But they would push people to a point of, unnecessary acting, Yeah.
Okay, and Siki, in fact, let's get a call from, is it Mandla, who's on the line? Who wants to...
Peter, it's Mandla from Umtata in the Eastern Cape.
Yes, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, my contribution on the show this morning is that we must be careful of how we utilize the media to make movies and such shows or soapies as seem to promote alcohol as a form or tool of entertainment that ends up being, a burden of violence in cases of GBV. And that as much as we educate people, we must also educate them that many cases of GBV result from people utilizing alcohol. And there's this also, there's a spiritual aspect we seem to be neglecting here also, that the department or departments that are involved with this matter need to include some of us who have insights in spiritual matters to assist. Because we know a lot of these matters start from the unseen spiritual world before they manifest materially in the material world.
Thank you so much, Mandla, for that. And it's a difficult conversation. And Siki, I want to come back to you. And I just wonder, as a journalist, do you think that we get enough training in terms of reporting on subjects such as this? Because it seems as if maybe, you get taught journalism, who, what, where, when, how, why, but we don't get taught another layer of the consequences of reporting in a certain way.
Peter, there can never be enough. It can never be enough to get education about reporting on gender-based violence, because we're moving with times. Yes, of course, as journalists, we do our own research, we do our own investigations, we read books, we watch other media institutions on how they report on these matters. But it is very important to empower ourselves as well. And it is very important for the institutions that we're working for to take us through intensive trainings from time to time, because these things, the gender-based violence is happening almost every day. Every minute, I understand, a woman is raped in South Africa. So, or is abused rather in one way or another, not necessarily raped. So we definitely need more information to this so that we are accurate and we are factual on reporting on these matters. Very tricky to report on gender-based violence, Peter, because first of all, you don't show the person, and you don't, sometimes the victim is unable to narrate her ordeal. So you dependent on a witness, or you dependent on social workers to actually tell you about what transpired. So to answer your question, it's definitely important to go through intensive training from time to time.
Do you think we use enough experts in our stories? Because I do think sometimes expert voices that can contextualize are not always there.
Yes, Peter, as well. Even in that space, we need to improve. We need to improve. Most of the time, us as journalists, maybe going back to sensationalism, we tend to avoid speaking, including aspects in these matters, because we want the victims to tell the story, and most of the time they are unable. They are not in good space. They are not in positions, to tell their stories, to tell their ordeals, and at the same time, you cannot reveal the identity of the victim in one way or another. You can't speak to the mother, you can't speak to the father, you can't speak to the relative. So we do definitely need aspects to unpack these matters.
Susanda, this is a difficult one, because overall the question I'm asking is, how much does the way we report and portray in our films and television series affect society and form attitudes and behaviors? And how can we do it better? Do we tell more stories, tell less? I suppose it's somewhere in the middle, but tell us a little bit about how we shape society through the media.
Thank you, Peter. And I think that was the crux of my PhD, saying that most people's experience of the criminal justice system, both in terms of courts and even in terms of crime, is not particularly from a first-hand account. It is through mediated forms like TV news, like film. And one scholar calls it the media's iron grip on legal imagination. So how we tell stories about violence against women and children and other crimes really is central to how society understands what is going on and experiences these crimes sort of in their minds, and the way they navigate the world. So it's really no small matter. Pumla Qola has come out with a brilliant book called The Female Fear Factory, and she talks about this fear that is created in women through various structures in society, including the media. And that is sort of the framework that I base this particular paper on. And what I am saying is, yes, it is absolutely a very tricky topic to discuss, because on the one hand, you don't want to traumatize victims by having them rehash what has happened. On the other, you really do want to make sure the story comes authentically from them. And my critique is towards media production practices, where we are really on this, if it bleeds, it leads a narrative, and we are about producing the most number of stories, not really focusing on the depth of the stories. So the last point, for example, is over the last 16 days, how many stories have we seen that look at the issue of climate change and how it is perpetuating gender-based violence, or what is happening in online spaces? We're really fixated on these kinds of narratives that we've gotten used to, these scripts that we've adopted, because we think they are the ones that are most impactful, that we're really missing out on opportunities to tell deeper, more meaningful stories that could lead to change on the part of newsmakers. So my call, I understand journalists are really traumatized, especially because they have probably been victims of gender-based violence if they are a South African woman. But the call really is for us to use the power of the platforms that we have to speak truth to power and move beyond these kind of scripts that we have adopted.
There's a couple of issues I want to deal with you now. One of them is, do you think that our script writers, our producers, directors can be doing better stories around gender-based violence? Sadly, they're pretty stereotypical, and we see the same things over and over again. Do you think that we should spend a bit more time to be a bit more creative and purposefully try and shape society, or do we just reflect society as we see it?
And that's what's happening. There's just the mirroring of what's, instead of a stronger message of education and empowerment. So we just, it looks like we're just repeating and telling people what's already happening. How do we stop that through storytelling? How do we educate people that maybe, let's tell a woman who is in an abusive relationship, let's create stories that this is what you should do, this is where you can go. I think the content should be driven more in that direction, and not have stories where there's less scrutiny of the issues that cause these things. So there's always more. There's always room for improvement, and I think we are now at a point where there should be more improvement and spending time and having more research into these things, into what do we do to make communities more stronger and more empowered to make sure that these things don't happen any further.
The other issue is sometimes when we use gender-based violence as a word, there's a thing in our head of what we think it looks like. But it could be sexual harassment. It could be the way that somebody brushes beside you when you stand next to them. Tell me a little bit about that.
I mean, when it happened to me, I didn't even know it was sexual harassment. And I think that's the thing. People think GBV is only physical violence. It's economic. It's a whole lot of things. And so when it happened to me, when I'd heard that what was happening to me was sexual harassment, I was shocked, because I had never imagined that that would happen to me, and it would never happen to me because I would never allow someone to be physical. And with learning and hearing different things, no, this is sexual harassment. It doesn't have to be someone touching you or groping you or whatever it is. There are different elements, and I think that's the lesson for people to know the different abuses and harassments, and
I wish we had more time, ladies. Sadly, we've run out of time. Senior Lecturer, Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Sisanda Nkwala, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your article. I can't wait to read your PhD doctorate. I think it'll be an education for us. Vati Swandaga, award-winning author, actress, broadcaster.
I haven't won an award.
I'm sure you will for this latest book, Unfiltered. But thank you so much for bravely telling your story. And Nsiki, one of our best journalists, reporters, great work on Cutting Edge. Thanks so much indeed for giving the journalist's voice. To all of you, thank you very much, ladies. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Radio Awards, the winners have been announced, and we'll be talking about who and why, and also why PBS Radio is doing so well. Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society. Now, radio listenership in South Africa is year on year above the international average, with surprising winners in this year's South African Radio Awards. And we've invited some guests to tell us a little bit more about what made them stand head and shoulders above the rest. And joining us for this discussion, we're joined by Wandile Langeni and Neo Koao from the VOW FM, that's the voice of Wits FM. We're joined by Spelele Sixaso, who's the Head of Public Broadcasting Service, PBS Radio at the SABC. And we're hoping to hear also from Spelele Nzuza from Gagasi FM. To all of you, welcome, congratulations, and great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, I'm going to start with one of my bosses because I think we want to talk about PBS, public broadcasting, and it has such an important role to play in society, isn't it? So tell us about how you feel about how we're doing and being recognized in the way that we've done in the Radio Awards.
Thank you. Good morning, Peter and your viewers. I'm very happy with how we are performing as the PBS platform. In fact, as radio in general, in the SABC and our different stakeholders that we have. As we know, I don't want to rattle on about our mandate, which is to inform, educate, and entertain. We're doing exactly that at this present moment, which actually then when we look at the numbers and the performance of the different radio stations, it actually proves that the guys are doing what they are supposed to do. You look at your African language stations, they're growing. They're driving over 66% of the market share that we have in radio. So when you include the commercial brands and the Fortune 4, which is your Lotus, SAFM, and RSG, you get to over 71% market share, over 30.3 million listeners in 1 week. So that is amazing at the moment. It's a good time for radio. It's a good time for radio.
And then there's campus radio, which you guys are rocking, Wandile and Neo. Tell us a little bit about what's different about doing radio on campus, predominantly for a campus audience. What is it that you guys are doing? Let's start with you, Wandile. And what do you think is the winning formula that got you recognized?
Well, Mr. Ndoro, thank you very much for inviting us here. And a very good morning, afternoon, or evening to the listeners. It's a very good opportunity, to be honest with you, to be speaking to people that are, the same age as me, as well as an age that I come from, So it's just a matter of always getting them excited to wake up and just, just being excited to go out and do your own thing. That's the one thing that we always make sure on the main switch, to make sure that, wake up, go and get what you need, get that degree, get that job, get that, that business, because it's all about black man, you're on your own.
Now, what are young people listening to that you're tuning into and that they're resonating with? When I watch television and listen to our main stations, are we on the same pulse as you guys, or is there another whole world playing out?
Thank you for inviting us. I must say that I think content has to be one thing that boosts numbers in terms of radio. When you talk about content, we are based in a campus radio station. So we need to always relate to our audience. Our primary audience is the students. So waking up in the morning knowing that you have a mission, I'd like to call it a mission, to make sure that every student wakes up and is entertained. And not just students there, but everyone within the Joburg Metro. So I must say, radio, it's on another level. Yeah, definitely.
Public service is a unique thing, I think, in many respects. And I just wonder how it's changed over time and how you track what needs to happen on the public service. I worked at SAFM years and years and years ago, and I know that it's changed a lot. How do you figure out where we are and what needs to be heard?
Thank you very much for that question. Public service, I don't think we can say public service changes. What changes is strategies and what you do to ensure that you are servicing that public. I like what you said, content. Content is very important. Now, from our side, we'd invest on research, from music research, content research, talking to our listeners daily. We're having a huge conversation to the upcoming radio practitioners before we walked in. That's also part of research. So when we get all of that, we craft it in together, mix it with talent, we move.
Wow. And it's resonating, isn't it? I mean, people seem to be, there's so much in terms of what they can go to, especially now that we have social media platforms, etc., etc. And even how you deliver public service radio has changed, isn't it?
Certainly, with the call it technological advancements. So enter the digital scene. But we know radio is a very naughty medium. It's a chameleon of media. Whatever comes, we adapt. TV came, we adapt. Telephone came, we adapt. Social media, digital media, we're adapting to it, certainly, to make sure that what's important for us is to deliver the content, the right content that people are looking for. So usage of all of these, call it podcast, call it new other platforms, as long as we are delivering the content that people are looking for.
All right, so we're going to come back to you just now because we're going to speak now to Spelele Nzuza, who's with Gagasi FM and has been inducted as a rising star. Spelele, congratulations on your recognition, which must mean you're doing very special and amazing things as you start your career. What did it feel like to be recognized in this way?
This is quite a exciting experience, and especially for someone who comes from the deepest rural areas of KZN in Empangeni and making it to the world. It is quite inspiring, and I think there's still more to come.
So what inspires you every single day to produce the content that you produce?
Well, the content that I produce is quite different from what other radio stations are doing, because we make sure that our content is speaking directly to the people of KZN and also those who join us via the Gagasi FM app, because we are also a youthful brand, and we make sure that our research is based on the things that people go through. We have 4 segments in the show that I produce. We have Indaba Open Line on Mondays, where people get to call in and engage in whatever topics that are making headlines in the news. We also have Business Indaba, where we go to small businesses and make sure that we process and monitor their operations in making sure that they come back from, we come back from the looting and also flood devastation. We make sure that we give them a platform to sell their products. And we also have our Wednesday segment where we interview traditional people, where we get to interact on cultural matters, as well as things that people used to live with back in the days, and now the things that we do in our days. And we also have our Thursday segment, of which is Sex Indaba, and we discuss intimate matters, relationships, as well as healthy lifestyle. So you know that Spelele Nzuza is only 26 years and producing that much content, it shows that you have to make sure that you get into the minds of the listener. Make sure that you go around, do your research, and make sure that you produce what expected in terms of content.
Wow, it sounds like you work really hard, and I guess that's part of the story, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of young people think that you just show up in studio and that's it, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to create the quality that you do. Tell us about that experience.
100%. I mean, waking up is not easy, hey?
That's
the first thing that we need to address. But I mean, it's just a matter of, just putting yourself out of the picture and putting the listener first, because we don't do this for ourselves, we actually do this for the listener. And not to mention the passion, hey, I literally used to listen to radio while I was working at the call center, and then I resigned and look where I am now. So yeah, I'm grateful, I'm not gonna lie.
And Naya, I get a sense that people want to be heard and listened to and to speak. Is that something that you're finding and that you create space for?
Definitely. So there's this guy that we always meet on campus. And then this guy always comes up and say, guys, what are you talking about on radio? What was the conversation about? And I just want to add on to say, when we say listeners, it's a bit tricky when it comes to them actually interacting with us, because we need to also channel what we're asking. We need to also channel that, you know what, okay, Sharp, this is the content, but we need to make sure that it is aligned. So this guy every morning after our show comes through and then says, guys, what were you talking about? No, like, it's nothing hectic. Just tune in and then you'll see. But yeah, man, it's hashtag the main switch. Yeah.
So, Spelele, the audience profile has changed because the population of the country has changed. We've got mostly these people now. Is that reflected on our radio stations? Because I would imagine then the conversations shift a little bit more.
Certainly, I'm going to zoom into the African language stations, which is, there's a perception that there will be older people listening to those radio stations. And you'll be surprised when you look at the numbers that close to 50% of our audiences in those radio stations actually listen to African language stations. He listens to Motsweding, he listens to Mhlobo. We're having a discussion around that. What's important around that, though, is how do we then now engage the young audience that we have? On FM, yes. On the ground, yes. Online, yes. Hence, the SABC just launched the new SABC Plus app, taking us into the OTT space, whereby now, when you're looking at radio, you're not just going to be, which scares us, by the way, as radio people. Now we're going to be visual. We're going to see.
You're going to dress up properly.
No, now we need to dress up. It's going to be a visual theater of the mind, as opposed, which is, from our side, then it tells us that there's more now that we need to bring, linking it back with the PBS mandate or public service, so to say, whereby now we can zoom into localized content, actually give a story, a picture of what happened this year when this king went to this cave and what was it doing, from a history, from a different perspective. Now that's opportunities for visual documentaries produced by the new upcoming crop of radio.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Spelele at Gagazi FM, what do you see in the future for radio? From what you've experienced and what you're seeing unfolding, what does radio look like going forward?
Well, I see radio, firstly, I see like the division between radio and TV because of the new digital technologies. I see it merging. I see radio becoming one thing as TV because of digital content. For example, there is this a segment that I produce. I normally take videos of my shows, and I produce those videos for the app and also for our online platforms. So that people, even if you missed the show, you go back to that podcast and then you tune in. By so doing, I make sure that I cater for everyone. You see, there's this thing that some people, if you are at work, you cannot like listen in real time. But when you come back, you go back to the archives and make sure that you go through our content. By so doing, we are pushing this thing of making sure that radio is there to empower, is there to inspire, and also to motivate the youth. Since Gagazi FM is a youthful brand, I see the future in a good hands going forward. You see, if Spelele is this young and producing the best nighttime radio show in the country, producing current affairs, you know what's coming in the near future, because now I'm making sure that I myself, I create that platform for others. I go back to where I started in my community, making sure that I educate these kids about the importance of radio, because you know that these days journalism in our communities is not something that is as bright as other careers.
Spelele, thank you so much. Congratulations on your recognition as a rising star. When are we going to get him? And these two as well. So to all of you, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Thanks for your time and congratulations and well done. And that's where we'll leave it for this week, Media and Society. Naledi will be back in studio next week. For us and from the team, have a great week ahead. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.